Hello, what we're going to be covering in this video are Python functions. So we've used several built-in Python functions. So let me just go in and type in John Doe, and then the print. When we call a print, the print is a function. So what we're doing is we're passing in the name, and that gets displayed to the console. Another function that we've used is the len function, which will go ahead and find the length of a string. So in this case, we're going to find the length of John Doe and then print that value out, so it'll print out 8. You can also write your own function. A function is like a mini program within a program. Functions are used to break complex problems into small problems to be solved one at a time. Functions eliminate repetitive code and can be reused in other programs. If you're typing in code and continually copying that code either into the same program or into other programs, you could probably go ahead and write a function for that program or for that block of code, and then when you ever need to call that block of code, you would just call that function. So again, functions eliminate repetitive code and you can reuse them in other programs. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create our own function. This function is without parameters and has no return values. So let me just go ahead and type it in, and then we can talk about what it all includes. So what we're going to do is we're just going to print variations of hello. Hit enter again, and then I'll go ahead and hit the backspace. So what this will do is that'll take me back to the beginning of the margin, and what I'm going to do here is I am just going to type in an actual call to my function. And then what I'll do is I'll print a blank line, and then I'll call the function one more time. So the first line is a def statement, which defines a function named hello variations. The code in the block that follows the def statement is the block, the actual code function block. That is the code that's executed when the function is called. It's not when the function is first defined. So basically, when we run this program, this code does not get executed until the function is called. And that's what we see on this line and on this line. The hello variations line after the function are the function calls. So let me just go ahead and run the program. Click on OK. And we will call it hello. I'll click on save, and then what happens is basically hi, hello, hey, and howdy get displayed twice because we're calling that function twice. So what I want to do is the next thing I am going to do is I'm going to go into our Python tutorial so we can just walk through the execution of that program. So what happens is when Python reads this, it sees the def statement. So what it'll do is it'll advance down to our function call. So on line 7, we're calling our function hello variations. That moves the program execution back up to line 1, and then what we do is we execute the 4 statements, statements 2 through 5, and then after those statements are executed, then what happens is we move down to the next statement, which is our print statement. That gets executed, and then we make our function call again, and what happens there is we print the 4 variations of hello, and then our program is terminated. So in code, a function call is just the function's name followed by parentheses and possibly with some number of arguments in between the parentheses. When the program execution reaches these calls, it will jump to the top line in the function and begin executing the code there. When it reaches the end of the function, the execution returns to the line that called the function and continues moving through the code as before. So that's what we saw in the visualization tool. So when you call the print or len function, you pass in values called arguments, in this context by typing them between the parentheses. You can also define your own functions that accept arguments. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and create a new program. So I'll just create a new file, and what we're going to do is we're going to define a function that when you pass in Fahrenheit temperature, it will go ahead and convert that temp to Celsius. Okay, so within parentheses, what we need to do is we need to specify the argument value that's going to get passed in when the function is called. So that's what we're specifying temp as, and then our converted temp will equal the formula of 5 divided by 9 and then we're going to times that by our temp minus 32. So that's our formula to convert from Fahrenheit to Celsius. And then we're going to go ahead and print out the information. We'll print out the temp, Fahrenheit temp, and then we'll print out our converted temp. Okay, so let me see here. I forgot to add my closing paren. There we go. Go ahead and hit enter, and then I will go ahead and hit the backspace. There we go. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my function called. So again, to call the function, I need to specify the name of the function. And then I need to specify the argument that I will be passing into the function. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it a couple times within this program. And we will pass in 212 the second time. Okay, so the definition of the Fahrenheit to Celsius function in the program has a parameter called temp. A parameter is just a variable that an argument is stored in when a function is called. So in this case, the first time the Fahrenheit to Celsius function is called, it's with the value 32. The program execution enters the function and the variable temp is automatically set to 32. The converted temp is calculated using temp, and the temp and converted temp are printed out. So this function has a parameter but does not return a value. So let me just go ahead and run it. And we will call it conversion and click on save. So what it does here is it prints out 32 degrees in Fahrenheit is 0 degrees in Celsius, and 212 degrees in Fahrenheit is 100 degrees in Celsius. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this code into our Python tutorial so we can watch the execution of it. Okay, so the first thing we do is we make our function call. So within our Fahrenheit to Celsius function, a variable of temp gets created, and what gets stored in there is the value that was passed in, which was 32. Then we go to the next statement. We basically calculate our converted temp, which gets stored in our variable converted temp. Then we go ahead and reprint the information. You can see the return value is none since we do not have a return statement. And then when I click on the forward button, basically the converted temp and temp variables are no longer exist. So after a function is executed and it passes control back to the calling program, those variables no longer exist in memory. So when I call the function again, those variables get created with the new variables. So in this case, it's temp at 212, converted temp at 100. We'll go ahead and print the information out. There is not a return value, and then the program terminates. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm just going to look at a function in Python that I've already created. So let me just go ahead and open up a recent file. And what it's called is it's called Old MacDonald. So I think everybody's familiar with the Old MacDonald has a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and then basically what you do is you pass in the name of the animal and the sound of the animal. So if we wanted to print out this and pass in for the first time a lamb, a duck, and a cow, what we can do is we could go ahead and create a function called Old MacDonald where we're passing in the animal and sound, and then all we have to do to create another verse is just pass in a new animal and a new sound. So that if we wanted to go ahead and write this code without using a function and pass in 3 different animals, there would be a lot of copying and pasting in order to create 3 verses of the song. So in this case, we just have 1 verse of the song, and then we pass in the animal and the sound the animal makes. So I will just go ahead and run the module. So as you can see, the first time through, we pass in a lamb. He says ba. Second time through, we pass in a duck. He says quack. And the third time through, we pass in a cow, and he says moo. So that's kind of just an example of how it cuts down by using functions. You can cut down on the number of lines that you need to type in, and you can eliminate some copying and pasting. So when you call the len function and pass it an argument such as hello, the function call evaluates the integer value 5, which is the length of the string you passed in. In general, that a value that a function call evaluates to is called the return value of the function. When you're creating a function using the def statement, you can specify what the return value should be with the return statement. A return statement consists of the return keyword, the value or expression that the function should return. When an expression is used with the return statement, the return value is what this function evaluates to. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and define a function called addition. So let me go ahead and click on File and New File, and we'll just go ahead and define our function. So what we're doing is we're passing in multiple parameters. So you can pass in any number of parameters as long as they're separated by commas. So we're passing in n1 and n2. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just calculate the sum, n1 plus n2, and then we will go ahead and return the sum. So as you can see, when I specify a return value, my cursor was brought back to the beginning, to the left margin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define another function, and what this is going to be is just describe program, and it's not going to take in any parameters, and what we're just going to do is we're just going to print what this program does. So this program adds two numbers together and displays the results. And then I'll add another print statement to print a blank line, and then I'll write my rest of my program. We're going to describe. We're going to call our describe program function on the first line, and then we're going to have the user enter number, and we're going to convert that number into an integer. And then we'll do the same thing. So I'm just going to copy and paste this. We'll have the user enter num2. And then what we're going to do is we're going to basically call our func, passing in num1 and num2. And then the return value will get stored in the variable called answer. And then we're just going to go ahead and print num1 plus num2 and it will be the string of our answer. So we'll go ahead and run the actual function here. So I'll run the module. And we will call it addition. So I'll go ahead and save. And then what they want us to do is enter a whole number. I'll enter 15. I'll enter 20. And then, oh, okay, can only concatenate string to string. So let me see here. What did I... Oh, okay, I know what I did. So let's go back into our program. I forgot to convert num2 into a string, so we'll go ahead and update that. We'll run it again. enter 10, and we'll enter 15, and then basically what gets printed out is 25. So let me go ahead and we will go ahead and run this program in the Python tutorial to kind of walk through the execution of it. So we'll click on Visualize Execution, click on Forward. So basically what we do is we describe our program. So the controls goes up to describe program. We go ahead and print out, this adds two numbers together and displays the information. Let me resize that here a little bit, and then we'll click on forward. We'll drop back in. They want us to enter some inputs, so I'll enter 10 and click on submit. So now we can see that num1 is 10. They want us to submit, enter another number. N2 is 15. We'll go ahead and click on forward, and then we're going to call our function, passing in num1 to n1 and num2 n2. We'll go ahead and calculate the sum, which is 25, and then our return value is now 25. So that gets saved into answer. And then finally, we go ahead and display 10 plus 15 equals 25. So the other thing you can do is, let me just go back into our program. Instead of calculating the sum and storing it into a variable, what I could have done in this function is I could have just returned n1 plus n2. So when I write it like this, basically what happens is the expression gets evaluated and then that value gets returned. So if I go ahead and run the module, click on OK, I'll enter 10, I'll enter 15, and the function works the same way. So you can go ahead and either store the value in a variable and return that variable, or you can go ahead and just return the value that the expression gets evaluated to. So often all you need to know about a function are its inputs, the parameters, and the output value. You don't always have to burden yourself with how the function's code actually works. When you think about functions in this high-level way, it's common to say that they're treating the function as a black box. So when we use the len or the print functions, all we need to know is what we're passing in and what value gets returned. We do not know the code behind how the function actually executes. So that's all I wanted to talk about with regard to Python functions. So we will